In our time of confession, we've been looking at the sixth commandment for probably a couple months now. The sixth commandment, which says, "You shall not murder," is the most basic way to love your neighbor as yourself. To deprive your neighbor of life is to take away all he possesses, for anything else is of no use to man if he's not alive to use it. Similarly, depriving oneself of life takes away all that you have on earth and also deprives your loved ones, family, and friends of the blessings that you bring to them. As we consider this commandment and the Westminster Divines' approach to it, we see the concerns they had for the ways to promote life, to make life not only more enjoyable, but longer and better. Question 135 of the Larger Catechism asks, what are the duties required in the sixth commandment? And it answers first in the general, all careful studies and lawful endeavors to preserve the lives of ourselves and others. And then it gets specific. Last week, in consideration of this question, Dan covered the phrase, a sober use of meat, drink, and physic, which was a 17th century way of saying medicine. And so that relates to how we eat, drink, and take medicines to enhance our life, or to the abuse of those which can shorten our lives. The point is that part of not murdering, of promoting our own lives and the lives of others, is to take care of this body that God has granted us, so that we may use it for blessing our families and friends, for the advancement of his kingdom on earth. Like everything else we own, our bodies belong to God, and we are to be wise stewards of them, just as we are to be wise stewards of our children and the wealth with which God has blessed us. Our bodies are to be used for his glory, not just for our own whims, desires, and pleasures. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't enjoy what God has granted us. We are to enjoy God forever, as the first question in the Shorter Catechism says. We are to enjoy all that God has given us in this life. The Westminster Divines recognized that there are things that you can do to promote your own life. Eating too much, drinking too much, and taking too many pills, as Dan explained last week, is a violation of this commandment. Even though you're not murdering somebody, it's a violation of this commandment. But my task today is to cover the rest of this phrase. To promote our own lives, we are to have a sober use of meat, drink, and physic, and the phrase goes on to add sleep, labor, and recreations as well. God gives us sleep to recharge our bodies. Psalm 127:2 says that he gives his beloved sleep. God grants us sleep for the benefit of our bodies. I suspect that there are some moms out there getting up with a baby every 2 hours, or dads trying to work, raise children, do things for the church and school, that are snickering right now when I say that God grants sleep to his beloved. They're snickering, yeah, I wish God would grant me love with a little more sleep, please. There are times in life when you have to do things that may make you sleep deprived. To everything there is a season, as it says in Ecclesiastes 3. You can't help the seasons of life where you don't get enough sleep. So the best you can do, but all you can do is the best you can do. But make sure when you can sleep, you do. When I was an intern, one of my fellow interns used to make sure that he got what was called preventative sleep before a night on call. And Jill and I recently heard of a college student, a new girl that has newly gone off to college, who spent her entire first night looking at her phone and then was too tired for class the next day. Use your time well. Redeem the time, even if it's sleep time. Get the sleep you need in the stretches when you need it, when you can. Don't act, as my wife likes to say, that you think God should have put 26 hours in the day. We are to use labor soberly also. I spent an entire sermon talking about this a couple weeks ago. We work because God works. We work to provide for ourselves and others. We work to advance Christ's kingdom. As I said then, we can overwork, but a greater risk in our modern society is to underwork. Again, our electronic devices can be a big temptation here. Give your employer the work for which he is paying you, but don't work so much that you deprive your family. Work enough to provide for them. And then the Catechism mentions recreations. It's funny to me that the Westminster Divines in 1647 said that we are to soberly use our recreations. Imagine if they could have seen forward 400 years to our day. There are so many things out there to distract us from the real work of raising our children to love the Lord, of providing for them, of blessing others, and for advancing Christ's kingdom. Time is not sufficient to name them all, from sports to cars to guns for the guys, and clothes, antiques, and houses for the women. There is also the temptation to overdo our recreations to the detriment of our loved ones. And there's the temptation, in addition, to be a miser, to frown on every enjoyment in life. Each of these reminds us of our sin. One can act like they don't need sleep, can overwork, and look down their noses on all enjoyments. One can also be like the sluggard rolling on his bed from Proverbs 26, oversleeping just as a door turns on its hinges. One can be lazy about work. There's a lion in the street, it says in Proverbs. I'd better stay home today. And in our society, it is far too easy to over-recreate. It is far too easy to be dominated by our recreations and, by our electronic devices. We are each different and subject to different temptations in all of these ways. But God knows your frame. After all, he made you. He knows what you need to confess. I therefore invite you to kneel with me as you are able, confessing your own sin privately and then corporately as printed in the bulletin.